All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, last class we talked about the end of Rome. Okay, now we've come into the Dark Ages, the medieval times. All right, and as you're gonna see, yeah, it wasn't that great. There's a reason why it's called the Dark Ages. Okay, so let's go to the objectives. So we're going to analyze how the three-field system worked. We're going to examine the setup of Manors, and we're creating an argument on which is better, the barter system or the straight-up money system. Now, if you don't know what the barter system is, that's fine. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay. So here is your warm-up picture. The question is asking you to analyze this picture and basically tell me three jobs you see these people doing in this picture. All right. So any three jobs. And there's quite a bit of. So you look at even the people in the far background, they're doing something different than these guys who are in the middle and these guys who are up front. Okay. Now, like I told my students in class, um, if you don't know the technical name for that particular job, you know, um, you can just explain it. This person's doing this person's doing that. Okay, so if you don't know exactly what it's called, you're like, kind of stuck. I don't know exactly what it is. Just write it out. Explain to me what is that person doing. Okay, so remember, three jobs. Find three. If you put two, you're only going to get credit for two. You put one, you're only going to get credit for one. Get full credit, you need to write all three jobs. And trust me, there's more than three jobs here. Okay, so pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So during the medieval times, the population actually increased um, during this time. In the early medieval times, there were about 38 million people in Europe. And by the time the medieval era is about to end, um, it basically almost doubles to 74 uh, million people. Okay. Now, here's the thing too. There were some new tools that were added to the agriculture to, in a sense, kind of help workers. You know, now some of these tools you see up there up on top, they may look familiar. You know, uh, pitchfork, a hammer, well, sledgehammer, a pickaxe, shovel. Now, if you look at that first one, that kind of looks like the one the Grim Reaper holds, that's called a scythe. Okay, that's a scythe. Okay. Then you had axes, and if you look at the middle, on the middle part, up on top, right between the axe and the sledgehammer, that's called a sickle. Okay, that's what it's called. That's a sickle. Okay. Now, during the Roman and Greek times, a lot of times these guys would have a large field and they would plant like wheat. Let's use wheat for an example. And then there's these little creatures called locusts. Locusts, one is nothing. But the thing is, these guys don't travel in little packs of two, three. They're more like two or three hundred thousand of them. And they will tear through wherever and eat everything. Okay. So what these guys decided to do is have a three field system. In one field, they're going to plant, let's say, wheat. In the harvest field, they're getting ready to cut down the uh, whatever the fruit may be, whether it's corn or no, well, corn, not corn, because they didn't have corn in Europe. Let's say wheat. Say they had another field of wheat, and then there was another field where they would farlow, basically get the ground ready. The animals would eat the little grass, they would poop on the ground and fertilize the ground, so then they could start. The next stage would be planting. Now, locusts come through and they tear through the harvest. They eat up all the wheat that's on that field. Okay, it sucks. But here's the thing now with this three field system. Now that area where they planted the other wheat, now all they have to do is wait for that to grow. As opposed that they had one huge field and the locusts went through. Now they have to wait until it's all cleared out, the ground's fertilized, then they have to plant it and wait for it to grow. That long wait without food, that's gonna be hard. But this three field system, now, hey, we got a backup. It's gonna be growing in about a month, 2 months maybe. It's not as bad as it was if a whole field got torn up. Okay. Now, the people who worked the farms, these were peasants. Okay. These guys were considered the lowest class of every single group. Okay. They were the lowest of the low. They were workers. They basically had no rights. Okay. Uh, the the way I can explain it too is like this. Yes, they were kind of like slaves, but they were free. A lot of slaves they were, you know, um, some were chained up and things like that. They were auctioned off, sold off. These guys were not sold off. These guys were not auctioned off. Okay. If a peasant wanted to leave his lord's kingdom, he could. And if he escaped for a year and a day, technically he's free. But here's the thing, he's going to need some money. He's going to need a place to stay because he's not going to be able to do anything out in the open by himself. He needs a place to set up. And if he does set up on some land, that's another lord's land. And he's going to basically be a servant of that person. So no matter where you went as a peasant, you were on somebody's land, some lords, and they're going to be in their service. Now, if you look at the picture right here, this is basically the manor system. Okay. Typically on a hill, mountain, you would have the manor, the castle, the you know, cottages and stuff like that, whatever it may be. You had that up on top. Okay. Um, what made up most of the kingdoms? A lot of times it was the serfs, the peasants. Okay. That population of a kingdom was usually about 60 to 80% of a kingdom. So a lot of people were servants. Now, how was life for a man? Pretty basic. They worked the land, the field, they hunted, things like that. They were in a sense kind of free, more compared to women. Women were not free at all whatsoever. Um, Women had to cook, clean, take care of the kids, take care of the house in every which way, prepare, supper. So they hunted. The women had to basically clean up the animal and things like that, for the most part, and then use the animal carcass to cook and use other things for other stuff. You know, the women had to do a lot of work. Okay. Now, all manors had basically the several things in common. Number one, there was a manor. Number two, they had a church. Now, why is a church important? Because the thing is, these peasants, these servants, they had nothing. And typically, when people are dirt poor, I mean, we're talking dirt poor, have nothing, own nothing, um, they only have two things that are truly theirs: their family and their souls. That's basically it. And the church basically would tell them, hey, if you work hard, if you work hard, you do good deeds, you don't do anything to upset the Lord, you will go to heaven. So a lot of these peasants were like, you know what? I'll just keep my nose clean. I'll do my work. I'll do what I got to do. I'm going to keep on the good side. And then when I die, I will go to heaven and be able to finally enjoy, the afterlife. Some people, when I was saying this in class, were like, they really believe that? Yeah, yeah, they did. And that's like some people, that's the only thing they had to look forward to was when I die, I get to go to heaven. I get to enjoy paradise, you know, because that's all they had. That's really all they had. The other thing a manor needed forest land. They needed trees, not only for protection, but just in case, hey, we need to build more houses, we need more firewood, things like that. Now, during the early medieval times, the manors were everywhere. Why? Because there were so many different noblemen and things like that. Um, so manors stretched anywhere from 25,000 to 65,000. Now, a student some years ago asked me, why is that such a big gap between 25 and 65? How come we don't know exactly how many? Because when these kingdoms would fight each other, they would tear each other's manors down. And some were torn down from natural disasters, you know, hurricanes, lightning, fires, things like that. Some nature basically took over. Trees regrew, same thing with plants, and they just basically crumbled down the manors. You know, so that's why we don't have an exact number. You know, now this is a little calendar to show you what life was like for a peasant. Okay, I'm not gonna go over all of them, just a couple of them. So like in winter, during January, they clean ditches, cut wood. Again, winter time, so hey, we need firewood. You know, during the springtime, planting peas and flax and things like that. You know, hay. In the summertime, they're harvesting the barley, oats, the peas, beans, things like that. And then when autumn comes around, so winter's coming around again, that's when they would slaughter the pigs, collect firewoods. And like in December, if you notice, it says indoor tasks. So like making blankets and clothing and things like that. That's the time they would do that. You know, it's anything they could do inside indoors. So it was not a time for them just to kick around and like put their feet up and things like that. No, these guys were working year round doing hard work. So again, harvesting typically August through September, harvesting grains, preparing for winter time. Okay, bread is something that if you keep um, the wheat dry, it can last you. Right? October land work, November livestock, and then when winter is finally over, if it's February, March, start plowing the fields. You know, now, here is a fun, interesting thing. This is something a lot of students have trouble wrapping their minds around this. The money system back then, okay? In the 1100s, the barter system started to decline. The barter system was basically when people would go, you know what? I have this blanket. I like those shoes. I will trade you this blanket for that shoes. And that person might be like, well, I like these shoes, so um, I like your hat. How about this? Your blanket and your hat for these shoes. And the person might be, I don't know, that's kind of a little bit more than I was willing to spend, or give. Um, I don't know. If you got a pair of socks, toss those in and we're good. Yeah, yeah, I got some socks. All right. Then they would trade. That's basically what barter is, trading items for an item. There's no money involved. So if you ever had like a cards, baseball card, football card, Pokemon cards, and you traded somebody for another card, that's a barter, something for something, and there's no money involved. Okay. But as time went on, the barter system started to go away. People started going, you know what? Nah, just give me money. Give me the gold coins, silver coins. I don't want to trade you my shoes, socks, or whatever for that blanket. If you really want these shoes, I'll sell them to you, but you have to give me gold coins, silver coins, things like that. So exchange for items started going away fast. Okay. Now, as the medieval times started going through, old cities started to come back. Cities like Alexandria, and Constantinople, these towns that were around during the Greeks and Roman time, they started to make a comeback. Now, here's the difference between, really a big difference between old cities back in the Greeks and Roman times and new cities, which was during the medieval times. The medieval times cities had walls. New cities typically had huge walls with towers and everything to keep an eye on invaders and stuff like that. You know, don't get me wrong. Older cities, back Alexandria, Constantinople, and places like that, they had walls too, but not every place had walls. The new cities, all of them had walls. Okay. All right. So here is your question. Why do you think the barter system basically went away and money was more desired? What do you think? So give me one piece of evidence to support your reasoning and think about it. Why don't people trade even now to this day? Going, hey, I like those new J's. I'll give you last year's J's that I only wore once and this hat for those new J's. Why don't think people do that kind of stuff at stores and things like that? What do you think? Okay, so give me 1 second. All right, just wanted to see if there was another question. There isn't. All right, so once you answer this question, you're done with this lesson. Hopefully, you learned something new. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. All right, so you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later, okay?